Yeah. Good evening and welcome to the 35th meeting of the 143rd Council of the Corporation of the City of St. Thomas. I'd call on the clerk to read our Indigenous land acknowledgement, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. We acknowledge that the land on which we meet is the traditional territory of the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabeg, Adirondack, Neutral, and Mississauga peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We also recognize that this land is now home to the Munsee Delaware Nation, Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, and Oneida Nation of the Thames. This land was settled through Treaty 2, the McKee Purchase Treaty of 1790, and we, as beneficiaries of the treaty, recognize our collective responsibilities to the land and water. Next order of business, Your Worship, is disclosures.
Do we have any disclosures of interest this evening? Seeing none, next item.
Next order of business are the minutes. I have a motion that the minutes of the meetings held on September the 18th, 2023 be confirmed. Moved by Councillor Herbert, seconded by Councillor Peters.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Next item.
Next order of business are presentations. We have one civic award to present this evening, Your Worship, if you would like to make your way off the dais. And the award this evening is to Rhonda Smith. Rhonda has been volunteering for over 8 years and over 1,000 hours with the Central Community Health Center, events and groups around St. Thomas. Rhonda has been described as most wonderful and most dedicated volunteer since November of 2015. Rhonda has volunteered countless hours being the program lead of the coffee group, yoga and meditation program assistant, member of the client advisory committee, assistant with Pride Week, assistant for client appreciation barbecues, surveyor for client experience survey, assistant for community well-being, health and well-being week, and general office assistant. Rhonda is always willing to help and will do so every time she is contacted. No matter what the job is, you can count on Rhonda. She's never looked for praise or recognition. She's just volunteering to help make a difference here in St. Thomas.
Thank you for everything you do. It's people like you that make a total difference in the city, and you couldn't do it without. So tonight we have a from the city award. Thank you again.
Thank you, ladies. You're welcome to leave unless you wish to sit through the council meeting. You're welcome to do that as well. Okay. Your Worship, the next order of business are deputations. This evening, we have Tanya Sheldon and representatives from the St. Thomas Elgin General Hospital and the St. Thomas Elgin General Hospital Foundation to make a PowerPoint presentation regarding financial support for the Transforming Tomorrow campaign.
Welcome, everyone. Come on down.
Thank you. Good evening, Your Worship and members of St. Thomas City Council. My name is Mary Lou Crowley, and I am the Executive Director of the St. Thomas Elgin General Hospital Foundation. I'm pleased to share Stag Foundation's Transforming Tomorrow campaign with all of you. Before I get started, I want to acknowledge the passionate community volunteers and hospital representatives that are here tonight, bringing their support to Transforming Tomorrow campaign. We have committee members from our leadership and community and hospital family divisions who are the driving force behind our campaign's success. Thank you for being here. Having started in my role just 2 months ago, I am struck by the passion for our hospital in our community. I also want to acknowledge with gratitude the city's support of our hospital. You were an instrumental partner in the great expansion of STAG. You believe, like we do, our residents deserve a vibrant community, one in which we all thrive. To achieve this, we must ensure our family members, friends, and neighbors have access to essential life-saving care and equipment close to home. That's why we're here tonight. The $8 million Transforming Tomorrow campaign will enhance and expand STAG's entire diagnostic imaging suite and bring long-awaited MRI technology to our hospital. I'd now like to welcome Jeff Urich, our Transforming Tomorrow campaign chair, to the podium.
Good evening, everybody, and it's a pleasure to be addressing council. My former role as the MPP, I did advocate for years trying to get an MRI machine here into the city. And when the opportunity arose for me to chair this campaign, I jumped all over it because I really do understand the importance and the transformative change this MRI machine and the diagnostic revamp will do to our community. And it's coming at a crucial time for the city. We have an aging population who require prompt and effective and efficient medical diagnostics. And we also have the attraction now of Amazon and Volkswagen coming to the city, which will increase the amount of people utilizing our hospital services in the coming years. And when new families and new businesses follow the strong economic growth that you have created here in this city, they will be looking at our community to decide what modern healthcare services are available in order to make that decision to come and live in St. Thomas. The Transforming Tomorrow campaign is the next chapter in the heartfelt healthcare of St. Thomas Elgin General Hospital. While the Ministry of Health has agreed to pay and provide operating funding for an MRI, the foundation must partner with the community to raise the funds for the purchase and installation of the equipment. That is why we have partnered with passionate community volunteers, businesses, and local stakeholders to embark on the Transforming Tomorrow campaign. While the MRI machine is the catalyst for this campaign, there will be additional enhancements to the hospital's diagnostic imaging department. Renovations must occur in order to make room for the new MRI, and there will be improvements to the CT, nuclear medicine, X-ray, and ultrasound. These improvements will ensure St. Thomas residents do not have to leave the community for their diagnostic imaging exams. Thank you. Mary Lou.
Thank you, Jeff. I'd now like to invite STAG's President and CEO, Karen Davies, to the podium.
Thank you, Mary Lou. It's a privilege to be here again in front of council to talk about our hospital and the needs that we have. We're a high volume emergency department. You've heard me say that here before, a medium-sized hospital, which means we see close to probably 58,000 visits here in our emergency department. Put that in perspective, we're comparable to University Hospital in London. So whether it's a CT, MRI, X-ray, we need all of these technologies to keep providing the best care as possible to the patients of Elgin County. And to make sure that we can quickly diagnose, we need the best diagnostics possible, hence why we're coming here to you today. Right now, we send thousands of people outside of Elgin County to get an MRI. We send them to Chatham, Woodstock, and London as well, joining other really long wait lists, which is why it's so important. It's hard to believe we still don't have an MRI, actually, as I say all of this out loud. So we join other long wait lists as well outside of Elgin County. In 2016, many of you will know that we became a district stroke center as well. We've been nationally recognized since becoming a stroke center by Accreditation Canada for having excellence in stroke care as well. The MRI scan is the preferred image when somebody has had a stroke. It gives more detailed imaging of the soft tissues of the brain, and it shows the exact location, which is really important when you're in the middle of diagnosing a stroke and deciding what the course of treatment will be. So having an MRI and enhanced diagnostic imaging services will provide our patients with quicker diagnosis, enabling patients to have quicker access to care, whether that's at STAG or in a referral site. Enhanced technology also helps us to attract and maintain highly skilled professions. And that's becoming more and more critical as we face health human resources shortages. So I'm going to share next the 5 phases of this campaign. The diagnostic imaging area of the hospital has to undergo extensive renovations to be able to put this MRI in. Our campus, aside from the new piece that you see out on Elm Street on the corner there, is over 70 years old. And bringing in a powerful magnet requires a lot of renovations. It's not just renovations, but it's also to make sure the patient flow in the rest of the hospital is safe because of the dangers of a magnet. When we evaluated the DI department as a whole, we had other needs that were identified that came up as a service. We do over 80,000 diagnostic imaging exams annually right now, and we know that that's going to continue to increase. The community's growing, and Jeff's already alluded to the growth. So you can see in these 5 phases, phase 1 is the MRI installation, and our goal is to have our first patient through that MRI in October of 2024. Phase 2 is the new waiting room space, registration area, and again, looking at enhancing privacy and also safety and distance from the MRI. For phase 3, we need to relocate the ultrasound program to create a larger space. It's growing, and as part of this campaign, we'll be purchasing 4 additional machines. Phase 4 involves renovating the nuclear medicine area and replacing one of the machines within the nuclear medicine, actually one of the cameras in the department. Phase 5 is relocating the pulmonary function lab so that cardiac and respiratory programs are consolidated. All of these elements are going to continue to transform our diagnostic imaging program into a suite of diagnostic excellence, making sure that we can continue to provide excellent care to all of the citizens of Elgin County.
Thank you, Karen. I'll have Jeff Urich return to the podium.
I'm back. Thanks very much. You know from your experiences in municipal government and some of you in provincial government that funding for healthcare has always been a partnership between the community and the provincial government. The Ontario government funds up to 90% of hospitals' operating costs. However, it does not support equipment or technology. This is where the community and the municipality have always stepped up in a generous, transformational way. So today we are inviting the City of St. Thomas to consider a $2.5 million investment in support of the Transforming Tomorrow campaign.
Thank you, Jeff. The Stagg Foundation and the hospital are in the process of finalizing naming opportunities within the diagnostic imaging suite, and we would be happy to provide you with more information once that is finalized. Stagg Foundation will work hand in hand with you to execute a stewardship strategy that exceeds your expectations. Thank you so much for allowing us the opportunity to provide more information about the Transforming Tomorrow campaign by presenting to you tonight in person. Thank you very much for your consideration of this investment in our local hospital. Thank you.
Thanks very much to all the speakers. Do any of the members have any questions for any of our guests this evening? Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I would direct my question to all 4 of you. There's Jeff right there. I can tell you 4 or 5 years ago when I first ran for council that I had a little book with me and I would ask people, what do you think St. Thomas needs? I'll tell you, 30% said MRI. They struggled with going to London. They had to go to UH or Chatham. Wintertime was just a nightmare for them. And so this MRI has always been on my wish list. And I totally support the project for sure. I think it's going to be great. And I know I always said we had CT, we had a Lincoln, now we need a Cadillac. They complement each other for sure. And CT does certain things where MRI, like if you need your shoulder X-ray, or it's fine, but to really know the soft tissues and everything, especially in the knee, you need MRI. A gold standard today is still MRI for the knee. CT is just, you start with the basic X-ray to make sure there's no trauma, no tumors, and then you move on to maybe a CT, but you still have to have the MRI. CT is still the number one choice for emerge for trauma. You can take a CT. When the CT first opened, we were 30 slices in 30 seconds. Now you can get 500 slices in 3 seconds. So that's the difference, because you can't bring an MRI patient over to the CT because it'll just suck everything out the magnet. So it's so important to have this MRI for the people of St. Thomas. And I just think it's well overdue and great. And thank you, Jeff, and your team for working hard to get this. So anyway, totally support it. So thank you.
Through the chair to the counselor,
Certainly.
I only know this honorable stuff, but no, thanks very much. And I just want to comment, you're right. It's been a big ask for years in our community for an MRI machine to be added to our diagnostic imaging team. And I know the $2.5 million investment we're asking for is a large number. And there has been discussion, is it federal, is it municipal, is it provincial? But just to give you background information, the provincial government over the last 4 years did provide funding for a new laboratory that's going into the hospital. They did balance out the funding loss that when they brought on the new extension or the new expansion, there was a shortfall of yearly revenue. They did equal that up, and they've increased their funding to medium-sized hospitals. So there's been a lot of investment from the provincial side to build up our local health services. And this MRI is the icing on the cake to really transform our diagnostic imaging to a focal point of the southwestern Ontario, but also to complement the tremendous staff that have come, the doctors, the nurses, the technicians that have come to Elgin General Hospital in anticipation for this MRI, and the services that we're going to be able to develop and grow because of this diagnostic imaging campaign is only going to pay benefits not only for Elgin County and St. Thomas, but we're going to be so far ahead of the field that we're going to start drawing people and taking off other wait lists, because there's such a lean organization at Elgin General. It's going to be an amazing opportunity for the people of this area.
Thanks, Jeff. Councillor Peters?
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. We know that the multi-year commitment the city had made ended in 2022. And you used the term multi-year in your presentation. And we're facing a lot of pressures on a lot of different fronts right now. The previous grant, the 3.5 million, was over 10 years to the previous project. Is there an ability that if we had to look at, instead of a 10-year commitment or a 10-year delivery of the money, could we look at a longer term, 15 years, something along those lines to help us deal with a lot of other pressures that we have? And I have another question, Mr. Chair. So can it be extended longer than 10 years?
Thank you very much through the chair to the honorable speaker. Yeah, we will be very flexible working with the community on how we can achieve the financing for this imaging campaign. We appreciate and respect the hard decisions that this council and future councils will have to make, but we do recognize the immense importance of this campaign and bringing the MRI into the city.
No, and thanks for that. And I too, I'm extremely supportive. I'm not sure what slices were. I had pizza on my mind there, but no, I too am extremely supportive. I want this to happen, but we've just, maybe we can do it in a 10-year period, but when we sit down and do our budget deliberations. So I appreciate your answer on the flexibility of things. My second question would be, a previous presentation was made that I sensed was laying the groundwork for a bigger ask down the road. And I'm just curious when you're going to be back again to build on that previous deputation that came that seemed to be planting some long-term seeds that are going to be a lot more than 2.5 million.
Well, I will let CEO come up because I'm going to be done with this campaign. I don't think I'll be on that other campaign. Mainly probably because by the time the government gets around to funding the studies and the proposals, I will probably be retired somewhere and hanging out with Joe Preston. But
Karen?
Thanks, Steve. That's a really good question. And so we do need a new hospital. That's the reality of it. So that the core building where most of the care takes place right now is over 70 years old. Where we're at in that process is very early stages. We don't even yet have master planning dollars approved yet from the ministry branch, the capital branch of the ministry, sorry. So we next meet with them on October 26th. And so I'm looking out, so it's going to take 8 to 10 years. Best case scenario, if everything keeps going well, it's a long ways out, but the reality is we do need a new hospital. The other question that was asked previously was, so if you do build a new hospital, what happens to the current DI program? And there's two scenarios there. And again, I'm just putting this out there as potentials. If we were to rebuild on that site, it would obviously be used. It's already there on the site. If we were to rebuild on a larger site and build a larger hospital, we would have that place most likely as an ambulatory care site because that hospital is only 6 years old. We would have a surgical suite in there. We have the emergency department. So there's great opportunity for that whole campus to be an ambulatory care site. And because you're so far down the road, we know that the needs are just continuing to grow and escalate. We've already outgrown that site today.
Councillor Kohler?
Thanks, your worship. Councillor Peters hit on the biggest part of my question, but I will ask another one. And I appreciate the explanation of the way the funding works with the, participation from the community, not, in the province funding the operational part of it and the community. The way our budget works, it's a little bit different. Federal and provincial, they work with ability to pay, basically drawing taxes from income, right? So ours, we're not always realizing if we're taking money from people that can afford to take it or not. But I, as Councillor Peters, strongly support this whole initiative and wanted to know when it could be started, how long it could be taken out, because right now we have, I know the big announcement with Volkswagen, but unfortunately that income isn't going to be for quite some time down the road, but we have a lot of expenses to make sure that it actually becomes to reality. So the next 4 years are going to be some pretty tough budgeting times for this council to work through. So when it needs to start, how long we can extend it for would be something that we definitely have to take in mind, so we minimize the impact to the current ratepayer. But I know I asked this question when we unofficially met and I wasn't sure if you had an answer yet, but how much are you going to be looking for from the county? Has that been settled yet, or?
Yes, we have, the same ask will be made to the county, 2.5 million.
Further questions from the members? Seeing none, Maria, do we have a motion for this item? The delegation, or are we just referring it back to the budget process at this time?
Your worship, I believe it could be included in the budget process for consideration by council.
I'm seeing nods. Is that the direction we'll move? Okay, we'll refer it to the budget process. Thank you very much for this evening's presentation. I was really pleased to see the layout of the different stages. I think that there was some confusion in the community about whether it was just an MRI, but it's great to know that we're upgrading many features of diagnostic medicine. So thank you very much for that. It was most informative, and through the budget process, we'll get back to you. Thank you for your presentation this evening. Don't go now. It's just going to get going good. Next item, please.
Your worship, just give me 1 second. I'm just going to turn off the mic there. Council will now resolve itself into committee of the whole to deal with the following business. First committee this evening is strategic direction and development. First item relates to community improvement plan project for the property at 1155 Talbot Street. I have a motion that report PD 3523 relating to a community improvement project by ADD Warehousing for 1155 Talbot Street be received for information, and further the council approve a tax increment grant as submitted by ADD Warehousing for 1155 Talbot Street. Moved by Councillor Wookie, seconded by Councillor Macaulay.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Next item, please.
Next item relates to a community improvement plan project for the property at 151 Wellington Street. I have a motion that report PD 3623 relating to the community improvement project by 133-59069 Canada Inc. for 155 Wellington Street be received for information, and further the council approve a community improvement residential grant and planning and building fees grant for application 2023-130 as submitted by 133-59069 Canada Inc. for 155 Wellington Street. Moved by Councillor Herbert, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Councillor Wookie?
Thanks very much. When I looked at this, it scared me a little bit in a sense of we've got a drawing it doesn't really show how it's going to be divided up inside. And it said they're adding 5 units, and I don't know how many units are there currently. And I don't know who the developer is. I'm not disparaging anything. It's unclear to me. And my concern is that, we want to bring it up to code. Do we have a process by which after it is rented, we can come back and see this or any other unit like 3 months later to see if it's still meeting code? My concern with any dwelling where I don't have a diagram of how the bedrooms are divided up is that we might start with 5 bedrooms and then have 10 bedrooms 3 months later. Again, I'm saying this because I don't have an idea of what's going in there. And it troubles me that we don't see a more specific, a lot of times when we see these, we see a more specific view of what's planned, and we don't have that here. So that's a little bit of a red flag for me. And I don't know if we have the capacity to ask for a more detailed drawing. When they say they're adding 5 units, how many are there currently? If there's going to be 10 units, there's a lot about this I don't know. So I'd appreciate any commentary from any staff who might be able to help me. Thank you.
Thanks, Lou.
I'll try to provide as much as I can from what I know. As far as specifics, I could certainly share what's been submitted if there have been any of the details submitted. But to give you some sort of a comfort level, all the renovations would require building permit. Building permit would be reviewed in accordance to the Ontario Building Code requirements or zoning bylaw requirements. Occupancy wouldn't be provided until it's cleared for occupancy. What happens after the fact, it's the same with any building in the city. We don't know unless we get a complaint. There usually is no follow-up to once occupancy is established and the building permit's closed.
Supplementary.
Thank you. Is it allowable that for one unit to be accessed through another unit? Like, I'm thinking not, but I don't know how this works. Do you know what I'm saying, right? Like not directly from a hallway, but from going through another unit to get to the next unit. Thank you.
Through your worship, if they're to meet the definition of a separate unit, they have to be self-contained units. So you can't go through from one unit to another other than through a common hallway.
Councillor Gibson.
So just enlarging the diagram here, it says an entrance for unfinished basement is that going to be including residential use down there as well? Because the back, the north wall and the east or the west wall is very proximity to buildings, or other residentials. So it is the fire escaping that I'm thinking of for safety.
Through your worship, no, that's a very good question. I don't know specifically if the basement would be used in this case for a residential unit. And with much of our older building stock, they do have difficulty in meeting the Ontario Building Code requirements for residential units in a basement. You'd have to achieve, certain window sizes, height, ceiling heights. In this case, I'm not 100% certain if the basement is one, but if it was, it would have to be renovated to such a standard that it would meet all our Ontario Building Code requirements, including fire requirements.
Supplementary?
Thank you. So could we ask that they come back so that we have a more detailed information as to what they're building here, or we just go ahead with this and then and get a report? Thank you.
Yep, through your worship, I'm happy to bring back those details. I apologize, I don't have them. I'm not that familiar with some of the questions that are asked on this specifics. I just know the generalities of it. I'd be happy to bring back some of those details at our next council meeting.
Thank you. Do we want to defer it then? Maria?
Your worship, if the members wish to defer, then just need a mover and a seconder from the members. Moved by Councillor Herbert. Is there a seconder? Moved by, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments on the deferral? All in favor? That's carried. Any opposed? We'll defer it then. Thanks, Lou.
Your worship, the next item relates to Community Improvement Plan project for the property at 305 to 309 Talbot Street. I have a motion that report PD 3723 relating to the Community Improvement Project for 305, 309 Talbot Street be received for information. And further, council approve a grant and loan through the Heritage Facade and Building Improvement Program as submitted by 1237166 Ontario Limited for 305 to 309 Talbot Street. And further, council direct that a bylaw be prepared to enter into a Heritage Facade and Building Improvement Loan Agreement with 1237166 Ontario Limited relating to a CIP project at 305, 309 Talbot Street. Moved by Councillor Wookey, second by Councillor Kohler.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. Next item.
Next item is a community improvement plan project for the property at 492 to 496 Talbot Street. I have a motion that report PD 3823 relating to the community improvement project for 492 to 496 Talbot Street be received for information. And further, the council approve a loan and grant under the Heritage Facade and Building Improvement Program, loan and grant under the residential program, Heritage Design Grant, Development Charges Grant, Tax Increment Grant, Planning and Building Fees Grant, and a Heritage Tax Relief Grant for application 2023-131 as submitted by 1711664 Ontario Inc. for 492 to 496 Talbot Street. And further, council direct that a bylaw be prepared to enter into a Heritage Facade and Building Improvement Loan Agreement with 1711664 Ontario Inc. relating to a CIP project at 492 to 496 Talbot Street. And further, that council direct that a bylaw be prepared to enter into a residential loan agreement with 1711664 Ontario Inc. relating to the CIP project at 492 to 496 Talbot Street. Moved by Councillor Wookey, second by Councillor McCauley.
Questions or comments? There's a lot of numbers there. Councillor Gibson.
So I'm just a little confused on this. We're not confused on the application itself, just it's just that on page 81 and 128, there was an indication that there was a work order. So is this CIP to help to regulate the problems that they're having existing with the work order? Thank you.
Who wants to take that one?
I'm sorry, can you Through your worship, could you repeat the question again? I apologize.
Okay, so he's asking for funding here, so under the CIP. So when you go to page 81 to 128, I noticed there was a work order set back in September. So I'm just wondering if this money is to help pay for those work orders to bring it up to standards. Thank you.
Through your worship, as I understand, that's very much likely the catalyst that led to this, that works, there was an outstanding work order to bring this property or elements of this property up to standards. And the property owner is taking advantage of some of the funding that's available through the CIP program. And that's what the intention is to bring properties up to standards. And they're taking advantage of that. So I believe that's what the catalyst was.
Further questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Next item.
Your worship, unless there are any further items from the members under strategic direction and development, we'll now move into community engagement and services. First item relates to the downtown Oktoberfest road closure request. I have a motion that report ES 5623 relating to the downtown Oktoberfest road closure request be received for information, and further, the council approve the temporary closure of Moore Street from Talbot Street to the north entrance of the Moore Street parking lot from 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Talbot Street from Mondayman Street to the west side of St. Catherine Street and from the east side of St. Catherine Street to John Street from 12 p.m. to 10 p.m. on Saturday, October the 14th, 2023, to allow for the downtown Oktoberfest. Moved by Councillor McCauley, seconded by Councillor Kohler.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, Councillor Herbert.
Thank you, worship. I just needed a clarification when they have a special event permit application. So I see there's beer gardens there. So do they assume the responsibility, like putting up security and all that thing around the beer tent? And is there any risk for us if somebody goes down 5 blocks and they get in an accident because they've been drinking? Or is that all contained under special event permit? Thank you.
Thank you.
Through you, Mayor. Yes, they have to carry their own insurance, holding the corporation additionally insured. That's part of the process.
Follow up, your worship.
Certainly. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, also, I just want to clarify, it's okay, Jeff. I totally support this. It's great to have this in the city. I just wanted to make sure the definition of special permit. So thank you.
Thank you. Do we have a mover? Councillor Gibson.
Yes, your worship, moved by Councillor McCauley, seconded by Councillor Kohler.
Any further questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Next item.
Your worship, unless there are any further items from the members under this committee. Councillor Gibson has an item.
Councillor Gibson.
Thank you, your worship. Under new business, I'd like to bring my concerns about Ockman Street and Parish Street. A couple of weeks ago, we received, a few of us received a letter from a couple on Dunwich. And I noticed the street, Parish Street was fixed up, but I still have concerns about the property itself. So I was just wondering if staff is here tonight, that they can answer a few questions for us, please. Thank you.
Perhaps our city engineer could give us any update on that subdivision?
Certainly, through the chair to Councillor Gibson, a report on that subdivision is coming forward as part of the next council meeting. And we'll be happy to address any other questions at that time.
Sorry, so a report will be in next week then?
For Thanksgiving, yeah.
Okay, thank you very kindly.
Thank you. Any other questions? Next item.
Next, we move into infrastructure and civic operations. First item relates to reuse options at the Community Recycling Center. I have a motion that report ES 4323 relating to reuse options at the Community Recycling Center be received for information, and further, the council adopt advertising sign for reuse options at the Community Recycling Center. Moved by Councillor Wookey, seconded by Councillor Baldwin Sands.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Next item.
Next item relates to the vacuum truck tender award. I have a motion that report ES 5723 relating to the vacuum truck tender award 2023-030 be received for information. And further, the council accept the tender submitted by FST Canada Inc., operating as Joe Johnson Equipment, in the amount of $699,000 excluding HST, for the purchase of the vehicle specified in the tender 2023-30 submission and as approved in the 2020 capital budget vehicle and equipment replacement. And further, the council authorized an additional $11,302 from sewer reserves for the purchase of the vacuum truck. I moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Wookie.
Questions or comments? Councillor Herbert?
Thank you, Worship. So I'm going to assume we have one of those vacuum trucks now. And so is it traded in on the newer one, or do we keep the old one and work them both? I know it says replacement, but obviously it's working, I would think, right today.
Through the chair to Councillor Herbert, it's my understanding that once we receive the actual replacement unit, that the existing unit would then go on to market for.
Oh, for sale?
For sale, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? If not, all those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried.
Next item relates to the Industrial Subdivision Development Construction Award. I have motion that report ID -0323 relating to the Edgeware Line Servicing Extension and Industrial Parking Lots Construction Award be received for information. And further, that the quotations submitted by Amico affiliates in the amount of $3,935,000 excluding HST be accepted. Moved by Councillor Wookie, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Councillor Wookie?
Thank you. I'd just like to ask staff to explain this one just publicly, because we don't like doing sole sourcing things. It's generally not good business, but when there's a good reason for it, we do it. So if we could get something described to us, thanks.
Nate?
Your worship to Councillor Wookie. Yeah, just as a bit of some background to this there. So Amico is the contractor working with our provincial partners in Infrastructure Ontario, completing the grading works. We have to complete some works in addition to extend some services right to the property line for the future Power Coast site, as well as prepare some parking lots in the future. We're taking advantage of the contract that's in place with between Amico and Infrastructure Ontario, as the pricing as well that they have in place, taking advantage of that pricing to get this quotation provided for us to provide those municipal services and the parking lot work.
Supplementary.
Thank you. So just to ask the obvious question, how do we know this is a good deal for us? Thank you.
Through your worship, Councillor Wookie, we compared the pricing with various other tenders that we've received through other city work. And we also know that this project was competitively bid with the work that was with the contract that's with Amico and Infrastructure Ontario. They won a competitive bidding process to establish those prices. So we're very confident that they were that we're getting good value for our work.
Further questions? From the chair, just like to comment, because I was the one that was against single sourcing when it was about the fire truck, and I think for me, this is a perfect example of why we would single source based on the four conditions that were laid out in front of us in the report. So I'm glad to see that we take off the liability aspects as well, the legal aspects by doing this. So I feel very comfortable and think we'll save a lot of money on this. All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Next item.
Unless there are any items from the members under infrastructure and civic operations, we'll now move into corporate governance and administration. First item relates to the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority agreement. I have a motion that report TR 1423 relating to Kettle Creek Conservation Authority agreement be received for information, and further that a bylaw be prepared authorizing the mayor and clerk to execute a cost apportioning agreement with the Kettle Creek Conservation Authority. Moved by Councillor Baldwin Sands, seconded by Councillor McCauley.
Questions or comments? If I may, then through the chair, I'd like to ask a question. We are developing a tree strategy because we have a number of trees to replace. And so my question would just be, this is a new way of doing things with Kettle Creek. This is a category 3 service agreement because it's non-mandatory. And so this is the first time where they've had to come to us and work out an agreement. So I guess I'm just asking, is this a good deal for us? It's 38,000 for their plan of 50,000 trees and environmental monitoring. And my question is that good value? Could our own staff do it cheaper? And is now the time to look at it, or do we defer it and look at it as part of a bigger plan that we're going to have for tree planting? So it's just, I'm not necessarily against moving forward with the 4-year agreement, but since it's an opportunity to take a look at this because it's something brand new, we used to just have to pay, and they would do whatever non-mandatory programs that they wanted. And this is the first time with the new legislation that we get to kind of pick and choose. So Jeff, any comments?
Thank you, Mayor. I believe it's a good deal, especially the environmental monitoring, because they have the staff expertise to manage that. We don't. And that's critical too we use them for Lake Margaret, do the monitoring there. They don't provide us, obviously we're paying a bit, but they don't provide us or charge us for that. And it's also important for all the wetlands to have that monitoring done. I think it's for 50,000 trees, and they can manage that, procure the trees. So it saves staff time on our end. We don't have the staff resources to do it.
Thank you. All those in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, that's carried. Next item.
Next item relates to the 2022 audited consolidated financial statements. I have motion that report TR 1523 relating to the 2022 audited consolidated financial statements be received for information, and further the council approve the draft consolidated financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2022, and further the council approve the draft financial statement for the City of St. Thomas Trust Funds for the year ended December 31st, 2022. And further, the council authorize the mayor to sign the audit findings letter on behalf of the city council. And further, the council approve moving the 2022 surplus amount of $1,258,038 to the infrastructure reserve. Moved by Councillor Wookey, seconded by Councillor Gibson. And your worship, I believe we have a presentation before consideration of the motion.
Thank you. Evening and welcome.
Good evening. My name is Christine Scrimjar. I am the auditor for the city, and I'm presenting the draft financial statements for the year ended December 31st, 2022. I have a little bit of a preamble first, just to make sure council's aware of what's in these statements. I know it was covered in the treasurer's report as well. So we do, it is the city's financial statement consolidated for your own boards, which would be the Downtown Development Board, the Secondary Water Board, the library, and the EDC. So 100% of those. And then we also pick up our share, the city's share of the health unit, the Elgin Primary Water System, and Integris. And so that's why when we get to the budget versus actual columns, there's some significant differences, and I'll get into those when we get to that point. It is a draft auditor's report under Canadian Canadian auditing standards, those charged with governance, which would be this council, needs to approve the financial statements and then we can finalize them. And as you can see, they are dated as of tonight's date. So hopefully when they get finalized, we will be able to then move into getting the FIR finalized and submit it to the province, which is the next step in the finalization of a year end. So another one comment I wanted to make, your materiality. So we set as auditors a materiality, which is based on your gross revenues. This year it was $2.2 million. That does not mean that we only look at transactions over 2.2 million. As your staff will be able to attest to, every transaction that flows through the city's book is eligible for statistical sampling. We look at payroll, we look at purchases, we look at all your sources of revenue and do that testing. So, and then continue on with the balance sheet after that. So speaking of the balance sheet, we'll go through that. So this is the consolidated statement of financial position. I'll do it from a high level, but if there's any specific questions, please don't hesitate to ask me. So as an auditor, I look at a couple different indicators, one being about 3/4 of the way down this page, the net financial assets. That would be the amount of money that you would have in the bank at the end of the day if everyone paid you what they owed you and you paid off all of your liabilities. And as you can see, it's a significant increase this year from 11,655 to 22,484. So a very healthy balance sheet first indicator. Everything below that line are assets that you need to have in place in order to provide the services you do. So water, wastewater, road work, bridges, and then of course your buildings and the like. And as you can see, those numbers have increased significantly as well from last year. And there's a couple reasons for that. We did assume new assets so as subdivisions get completed, we assume those assets. And we did assume approximately $16 million worth of assets from developers. They put in those services and then we get to assume them and then carry on the maintenance of those. In addition, note 18 talks about some land that we've acquired. And then in addition, there's about $20 million of work in progress that the city is in progress of completing. That's assets that have been started, but the projects have not been completed. Most of those relate to some of your servicing for sanitary sewers and waterworks. So we're replacing the assets. As council remembers, we amortize our assets over the useful life. This year, the amortization cost was about $18 million. So we're not only covering that amortization by the increase in tangible capital assets, but we're covering that and adding more to it, which is meaning we're replacing them at a rate greater to what we're using them up, which is what we like to see as auditors. And then the last indicator I look at is under liabilities, that last number, net long-term liabilities. There's no new debt for the city this year. So we've replaced those assets. When we get to the note on the accumulated surplus, you'll see we've also maintained our reserve balances, which is our savings for long-term. And then we've replaced the assets in excess of amortization. So those are all indicators to us that you're in good financial health. Any questions on this statement at all?
Councillor Wookie.
Thank you very much. Just a commentary from you and Mr. Sheridan regarding the market increase in accounts receivable under financial assets.
Sure. I can, do you want me to take that? Okay. So the taxes receivable is not a concern. As you're aware, impact through COVID got behind a little bit on issuing SUPs and write-offs. And so we did a large SUP run. So supplementary taxes are taxes for new development. We did a large run at towards the end of the year, and those ratepayers have 60 days to pay that. So that's the main increase there, as well as it's just timing. That balance was cleared up subsequent to year end. So there's no collection issues that I have. Accounts receivable. So just reminding you that we consolidated those boards. And so several of them have large receivables. In particular, the health unit has a large receivable from the province for their grants. So that's in there, as well as our own grants for our capital projects. That total increase in overall capital, again, offsets in accounts receivable from the various levels of government until we get the projects completed. They don't send us their funds. So we're waiting for those, so that no collection issues in there. We do set up an allowance for anything we do think is non-collectible, and this is after that. Does that answer your question? Okay, great. All right, we'll move on to the next statement. This gets a little bit more complicated with all the consolidations, so I'll try to simplify it as much as I can. To your point, Counselor, the taxation revenue, you'll see there that we increased taxation revenue over budget. So those are those sub taxes that I mentioned before. The overall increase in revenue from the budget is really in that consolidation. So as you can imagine, the health unit has significant grant money that comes in, so that's the government grant increase. And then investment income is also up. As you're very well aware, the interest rates have skyrocketed compared to what they were during COVID. So the 2021 year, obviously close to 0 to 1% and significantly higher, obviously, in 2022. So that's really the increase there. I think there's a question here.
Through your worship. Good. The government grants, we have to apply every year for that grant, or is there something where?
So there's
don't apply?
many government grants in there. So there's many for your social services. So Ontario Works, social housing. So those all come based on usage as well. This is not capital grants. These are operating grants. You also, and again, in there is that consolidated public health unit, your share of those grants. And of course, they are pretty much 100% funded by provincial grants. Okay. So that's really the increase. I will also remind council, in 2021, COVID was still very predominant. And so a lot of your revenues and expenditures were not at the pre-level or pre-COVID level yet back in 2021. In 2022, those restrictions started to get lifted in February of 2022. And so we see things like recreation return back to normal. So user fees and things like that are up this year because of that. So that's the revenue side. Under the expenditure side, I'm just going to talk about the total expenditures, and then if there's any specific items you want to talk about. So it looks like you overspent by about 28 million, which is not the case. I will remind council that included in the actual column is $18 million of amortization. So that's that using up. So that's the big piece of it. There's also about $4 million added because of the health unit costs, and about $4 million added because of the Elgin primary water system. And so if you take those three numbers, so the 18 million, the 4 million and the 4 million, that's really the increase in costs from the prior, or costs from the budget. The one number that's pretty impressive is under the actual column, if you look at excessive revenue or expenditure, so this is your operations, you're just in a deficit of $28,000. So on a budget of $150 million, that's pretty much a break-even spot. So very well managed revenues and expenditures there. Everything below that line, below that $28,000 are items that relate to capital. So we take them out of there just because they fluctuate greatly from year to year, depending on what capital projects are incurred. And you can see there's a significant increase there, which again, part of that is explained in note 18. Coming down to the accumulated surplus at the end of the year. And as was mentioned in the preamble and in the treasurer's report, there was approximately a $1.2 million operating surplus that has been moved over to the reserves. We then get to two more statements, the cash flow statement. So this just shows the increases and decreases of the non-cash items on the balance sheet. The majority of these large dollar items are related to capital. And then the receivables, which has already been described, coming down to cash and cash equivalents at the end of the year of $70 million. And then the next statement is a snapshot of what happened in the capital, really. And as you can see, that's the second line is the $18 million that I've referred to from amortization, and then acquisition of tangible capital assets, 32 million. So very busy year for sure. We then get to the notes to the financial statement. I won't spend a lot of time on each one of these notes unless there's any specific one that you would like me to just help with. I will direct council to note number 9, which is the breakdown of the accumulated surplus. So the investment integris, I'm going to just go through each line. So the investment tangible capital assets, obviously a huge increase there, which we've talked about. And then the surplus is broken down. The investment in Integris is your share of that, and then you had over $2 million increase in that. Again, that's not cash in your bank. That's just an increase in an investment that you have there. The DDB has a surplus there. And then these unfunded liabilities, this is where we get an actuary to describe or to quantify what will be our eventual payout for our, in the most part, emergency services people, police, fire, down the line when they retire. We set it up in today's dollars just to keep it in mind to council that this will have to be paid out over the years. Again, it's not something that has to be paid today, but it is something that has to be paid. And I will mention that the percentage rate that was used as when we, as per the note in the financial statements for this calculation was significantly lower than what the 5% that interest rate is now. So we can assume that this accrual will go up when we do our next valuation, which is we do it every 3 years. Then we have our reserves and reserve funds. And as I mentioned, we replaced all that capital. We didn't take out new debt, and our reserves and reserve funds are in good shape compared to last year, an increase there as well. There are two schedules at the back of the financial statements. One breaks down your capital assets by components. And as you can see, infrastructure being both roads and environmental make up over half, which you would expect to be true. And then the last schedule is your segmented schedule. This breaks down revenues and expenditures by function. Under the FIR, everything is functionalized, and these are the functions as defined by the ministry. And so this is just revenues and expenditures based on those same functions, being the segue between these audited financial statements and the FIR that gets filed with the province. Also in your report is the trust funds. So you have a couple trust funds. We have a small one with the library board, which would be the Rin family. And then we have what I call pocket money. So at Valley View, residents are allowed to have some money to spend on things like hairdressing, tuck shop, those kinds of things. And so we do audit that as well because those monies are in trust with the city. I would also like to take the opportunity to thank Treasurer and his staff for all of their assistance through the audit process. As you can imagine, we can be quite bothersome when we're here, and so they put up with us, and we appreciate that very much. Any
Thank you very much.
questions at all?
Questions? Councillor Wookie.
Thanks very much. I ask this question every year and I'll ask it every year henceforth regarding a long-term debt and our capacity to handle that debt. That's something that's very important to us as we make strategic plans for the future. And just some commentary from you or the treasurer regarding, we do get, obviously at budget time, we get a full rundown of that. But you being quote unquote the outsider looking at this from the outside, what do you see and how would we compare to other municipalities in terms of that situation? Thank you.
Everybody wants to know how they compare. Well, as the auditor of 12 municipalities, I can speak to this a little bit. I would say that if you look at your debt to capital investment ratio, which is what we look at, you're in fine shape. The province, once you file your FIR, they always send you back a what's called the ARL, which is your annual repayment limit, and you're well within that as well. So I don't see any concerns at all at this point. Obviously, if you went into a large debenture in this next year, then that would cause me to look at it again. But at this point, you're in fine shape.
Further questions? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Next item relates to the 2022 financial results. I have a motion that report TR 1623 relating to the 2022 financial results be received for information. Moved by Councillor Wookie, seconded by Councillor Baldwin Sands.
Questions or comments? If I may, from the chair, then a couple. If the city treasurer, I'm just wondering, is it possible to get these earlier in the year? Yeah,
Which exactly are you referring to?
everything.
We are working on that. Yes, we're in a bit of transformation down there and we're playing catch up a little bit, but that is the plan to get more information out earlier for everyone.
For next year.
Yes.
Right, okay. The other question I had, and maybe it's more for the city managers. Each year at budget time, we go through a lengthy list of capital items, things that are in, things that are out. And I'm just wondering when we get down to this report, whether or not there's a way, right now we're being asked to put it all into reserves. And I'm just wondering in next year, whether a report could come to us in terms of items that administration still considers important that we couldn't get on the list, but now that you got an extra $1,200,000 that you still might want to get knocked off in this year's budget. And I'm just wondering if the members, if that's something that it could be given to us so that we could have a discussion and not be kind of like here tonight where we're just kind of hamstrung. We get the information and we're just putting it in reserves.
One thing that is important throughout the year, you'll see a lot of reports that come to council, and a lot of the funding in the bottom comes from infrastructure reserve. So we do a lot of things throughout the year that we might not be able to do in other circumstances, and we have that money available to us. So that's part of it. But and also the other part of this is if it goes in infrastructure reserve, it's not locked in there. Council can move it out of there and do whatever they want with it. But we like to have it in there as kind of our fallback for when we need extra money on projects, or if there's unfunded projects that come up that we want to do right away. It's very helpful.
Okay, thank you. Maybe I could just ask one that kind of ties in with this to the fire chief. An example, it came up today. Someone's hurt on Talbot Street. The fire department's out. They beat the ambulance there and they're attending the situation. And they've had to bring the pumper out. And we heard a few months back that the pumpers and the equipment like that, it's not based on their years, or it's based on mileage and things like that. So we're using a large pumper that's a very valuable piece of equipment to go out and doing certain daily calls. And so I'm just wondering through the budget process, or now that we know we've built up our reserves, that when we're talking in our budget process, that we earmark something for a smaller model, that the fire department could use. And I'm just wondering what that might look like and what the cost would be, so that when we have our budget discussions, we'd know. And what I'm thinking about is something similar to an ambulance, or something that would be used for emergency purposes for whatever meets your needs. But instead of the large pumper going out, all the money that's spent on diesel, and we're spending good mileage, where the truck gets downrated later or earlier because we've been using it all the time. Thank you.
Through you, that's a great question. And to be honest and fair, I think a report back to council, if members of council remember, in the past, we did run with a smaller rescue unit. We had a smaller Ford F-450 that was a 4-cab and had a box on the back that carried some unique equipment on it. And but we got away from previous administration, went with a different style of truck that they ran on calls. But you're completely right. We run a lot of calls. We're going to be north of 3,000 calls this year. So I think report back to council with what we should get and how that looks moving forward with all the strategic plans we have and what future growth looks like.
Thanks. I'd appreciate that. And I'm sure the rest of council, but as we're starting our budget deliberations, appreciate it. Thank you. Next item, please.
Your worship, next item relates to the donation of open space blocks in Harvest Run and Orchard Park land transfers. I have a motion that report PR 2523 relating to those land transfers be received for information, and further, the council accept the donation of open space blocks within the Harvest Run and Orchard Park subdivisions from Doug Terry Limited, and further that administration be authorized to undertake all required administrative tasks to complete the land transfer of the described lands from Doug Terry Limited to the city of St. Thomas, and further that administration provide Doug Terry Limited with a donation receipt for $27,500. Moved by Councillor Herbert, seconded by Councillor Macaulay.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Any opposed? None.
Your worship, unless there are any further items under this committee,
Maria, did we actually pass the treasury financials? I'm not sure if we voted on that.
your worship, if we have not, I do have Councillor Wookie moved and Councillor Baldwin Sands seconded.
Thanks. All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Thanks.
Thank you for catching that, your worship. We do have a couple of more items from the members under this committee.
Councillor Wookie?
Thank you. I've got two questions that are very different. So the first one, I'll start with the heavy one. It's a governance issue. And let's say we have a developer in town that says, I want to do this development, but to do that, I need some of your land, frankly, City of St. Thomas. And we say, well, let's talk about that. But we don't know what's coming because the site plan doesn't come until later. So in general, I just want to start talking about this strategically. How do we deal with this stuff? Land swaps. Does it have to become surplus before we dispose of it? What's our strategy? Like, what are our options in terms of these kind of things? Because as we grow, this is going to happen more and more and more and more. And we don't want to get painted into a corner where we're in a situation where we've got to make decisions and not have the information to do so. So that's my challenge with this one. And I'm just hoping to get a real general commentary from staff regarding that. Thank you.
City manager or no, Jeff, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Clark. Through you. We have policy around surplus land. Council has to approve that before we move forward with declaring the land surplus and then putting it on the open market. It's very clear and laid out within the policy. With regard to land swaps, that's something that we would have to enter individually on each basis. And that's another thing that we would have to meet with council on to provide all the options. Is it for the greater good for the whole municipality? What do the swaps entail? There's so many variables there, but I think for transparency, planning, if I'm involved, we would have to see what the details are and then report back to council to get direction from you.
Supplementary in that one. Thanks. I mean, I just say as a counselor, I'd love to get some education about this more in general, about municipal things to do with the municipal act and what we can and cannot do. And just because as we grow, this is going to happen more and more often. And I'd like to think I'm well armed in quite a number of aspects of governance, but this is one that I do not feel, no offense, this is not against staff or anything. I just don't feel like I have a good grip on what our responsibilities and powers are or are not. So that's just my commentary of that. And then if I could ask my second question, this one is a different one, very different. It might be for the clerk, city manager. I'm not sure. I don't know. I think I read someplace that when a conference comes up like AMO or Roma, that the mayor and two councillors can go, is what I thought I read. It might not be true, but do we have a policy about the number of councillors that can go to these things? Because I say that because, I mean, Councillor Macaulay, myself and the mayor were at an ISO, the electrical operator for Ontario. And what I learned from that one session was worth frankly, the price of admission that the taxpayers paid for me. But the point is, I learned a lot from that. And I would think that we would want to encourage counselors to go to the best training that we can. And I just would like to know what the situation is regarding registration for things such as AMO and Roma. Thank you very much.
City Manager?
Thank you, Worship. We had made I'll say it's a practice more than a policy as it relates to supporting council members and certainly staff to attend conferences, whether that be AMO or Roma. The position would be the mayor and or his designate or her designate and 2 other members. That has been a practice that we've had in place for the last little while. And what we do is we ask for people to identify if they're interested in going. Usually, and it's been reasonably well achieved, is that we take turns, that people take turns, council members take turns. And that has to do both with the amount of money you have in your budget and what can be supported by the budget, but also about ensuring that everybody gets a chance to go to at least one conference over the period of the term of your council term. Having said that, if there's a desire from council to increase that or provide more opportunities, we're happy to do that and bring it back as part of the budget process. We are working on those budget numbers to bring back to council in November and early December. And there'll be a chance then for you to look at, do you want to increase that? Do you want more people to attend? And there are expenses of it. It's an expensive activity, especially where there's travel involved as well, but happy to entertain those positions and bring them back to you if that's what you're looking for.
Thank you. I just think that the training that we get, the experience I get by going to something like that is extremely valuable. Thank you.
Next item. Councilor Herbert.
Thank you. Just wanted, Your Worship, just wanted to follow up what Councilor Wookie said. I can agree that when it's in Ottawa, you can't send a whole council. But if it's in London, we're not staying overnight. You can drive back and forth. You should be able to attend the sessions because as Councilor Wookie says, I learned a lot in Ottawa for sure, but it would have been great to be able just to drive over to London, spend the day and come back. So I think maybe it's something that could be looked at when it's in your backyard. So anyway, would be good for discussion.
Thank you. City Manager?
Thank you. Just for clarity, and I appreciate that, Councillor. The AMO conference at this point in time is planned for 2024, 2025, and 2026 in Ottawa. It will come back to London in 2027. So there's some opportunities for us to look at that as well. And then any other conferences. Roma is generally always in Toronto. But as in further to Councillor Wookie's comments, there are other courses and other training. And if council wants us to look at adding more to the budget, we're happy to do that with your support.
Councillor McCauley?
Just on a different note than what we're talking about, next Tuesday, which is our next council meeting, the St. Thomas Public Library is having a really important event called Community Conversations, and it's a free event to hear from people with lived experience of homelessness. And the exact time is at the same time as our council meeting. So I am throwing it out to fellow members to see if they would be willing to move our council meeting a little bit later. There is a public meeting at 6 p.m. and I am wondering if we could possibly push that council meeting to after that public meeting. And I am happy to make a motion and see if anyone is interested in moving the meeting.
Have we got a seconder for that motion? Thank you. Councillor Baldwin-Sands. So if I could summarize, the idea would be that we would attend that open house from 5 till 6, have the public meeting, and then have council after that. Questions or comments? Councillor Peters.
So I have a question for the clerk. If 9 members of council show up at that, is that a meeting?
Not unless we're doing business, I would think, but Maria?
Thank you, Your Worship. Unless during this, it sounds like an information session and information gathering, unless council moves council business along, then it would not be considered a meeting.
Any further questions?
And just to clarify, not all may be able to attend, and it's more of a drop-in. So, we wouldn't necessarily be there all at the same time. It would be from 5 to 6 drop-in.
All those in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's carried. Any opposed? Seeing none?
Your worship, if I could just mention that because the meeting time has changed in accordance with the procedural bylaw, we would provide as much notice as possible to the public to let the public know that our regularly scheduled meeting of 5 o'clock will now follow the public meeting that starts at 6 p.m.
Thank you for that. Next item.
If we have concluded everything under this committee, council will now reconvene into regular session. I have a motion that the recommendations, directions, and actions of council and committee of the whole, as recorded in the minutes of this date, be confirmed, ratified, and adopted. A move by Councillor Wookey, seconded by Councillor Baldwin Sands.
All in favor? Any opposed? That's carried.
We now move into reports of committees. First report this evening relates to the 2023 Municipal Accessibility Plan. I have a motion that report ATC 0123 relating to the 2023 Municipal Accessibility Plan be received for information, and further the council receive and approve the 2023 Accessibility Plan as attached to report ATC 0123. Moved by Councillor McCauley, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Councillor Peters.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I guess it's a question for Sandra. Is how do we incorporate things like the municipal accessibility plan and transportation master plans and recreation master plans into the strategic planning process? I think of the session that we had at the Queso station, and one of the things I talked about there was how we can make ourselves, I'd like to see one of our goals being a more accessible community. So how do we utilize what a committee of council does and put that into our forward thinking?
City Manager.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. To the question, I think it's really about how to set the strategic plan in such a way that you identify what the vision is or what the goals are. And then, and if it is to have an accessible community, or it's to have additional parks, is an example. And then the strat plan can identify that vision. And then it can also identify the mechanism by which we would do that. If that's by working with the accessibility committee to identify a certain number of activities every year, or implement the information that they share with us. So it's really about, we want an accessible community. We all agree to that. Your committee, the accessibility committee, agrees to that. And they, through their work, demonstrate the way that we get to that. So then we can report back out on that by saying the accessibility committee, others in our community, and the city itself has met that goal of increasing accessibility, and here's the ways that we did that. Here's the activities we've done, here's the feedback we received, and here's the advice we have taken and moved it forward. I think it's connecting it. As it relates to other plans, and the transportation master plan is a great one. If the vision for the city is to have a walkable community with good roads and good transportation, then we can then define in a similar way the activities that will help us meet those visions or those goals. I'm hoping that kind of addresses what you're thinking. I appreciate it's a complex piece to be able to tie those together. Ultimately, and the important piece that we're looking at too is how we report back to you and how those visions are met.
Councillor McCauley.
Mine is more process related. So when reviewing 2022's list, there were some areas that were not completed, but I didn't see them on the 2023 list. So is that, do they automatically just roll over onto the list, like using, Emsley Field, for example, there was 4 not completed, but when I looked at the 2023 list, I didn't see them on it. So I'm just trying to wrap my head around the process. So are those ones that aren't completed just put on like a master list? And how are they, how are they prioritized? And I'm not picking on you specifically. It was just one right in my head.
Ms. Bray.
Thank you, through you, Mayor, to Councilor McCauley. They do roll over. Emsley Field is a good example of, we've still getting costs on some of it because I believe it was built in the 40s, Emsley Field. So accessibility was probably the furthest thing up from their minds at that time. There was one item there I noticed that we can complete, making the contrasting colors, but the other ones would be a significant expenditure. It doesn't mean it's money that shouldn't be spent, but we do have pricing, for example, on the washrooms, and it's a complete renovation of the space, which would cost a few tens of thousands of dollars just because of the new AODA compliance requirements.
Thank you.
Councilor Herbert.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I was in the same ballpark as Councilor McCauley was, but I just wanted a clarification. What does ongoing mean? Like, is that just year after year after year, or not completed? Does that mean it's going to be done this year? Or, and of course, who does the prioritization of it? Because ongoing could be going for years if it's ongoing. Some of these things look pretty important to be done. So that was my question. Just some definitions of what ongoing means and not completed. When's it going to get done?
Thank you. Through you to Councilor Herbert. I can only speak for my department, but if ongoing means that we're aware it's there, we're getting costing, and then we'll move forward. It never disappears. But as I just noted that if it's a significant expenditure that we can't absorb through operations, it'll become a capital project.
Jeff, just before you get away, I had one with regard to the customer service desk. It says deferred to future year. We still don't have a permanent, well, I know we have a workable situation, but we still don't have a permanent situation where someone can come up to the customer service desk. It's not accessible. And I was just wondering, when it says deferred to to future year, is that calendar year, or is it the report? Like the report ends now, and so it'll be the next report? Because that to me just seems like a simple one. And if customer service is important, I think we need to get on it and not wait another year.
Yeah, facilities is aware of that. I'll have to get back to council with the cost for that. I know they've got costing.
Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Next item.
Next report deals with the heritage alteration permit for the property at 492 to 496 Talbot Street. I have a motion that report MHC 1423 relating to the heritage alteration permit for 492 to 496 Talbot Street be received for information. And further, the council issue a heritage alteration permit for the property at 492 to 496 Talbot Street relating to application HAP 1223, subject to the following. A, detailed elevation drawings be submitted to the Municipal Heritage Committee, and B, final confirmation of the cladding material be provided. Moved by Councillor Wookey, seconded by Councillor Herbert.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? That's carried. Any opposed? That's carried.
Next report relates to the heritage designation of 114 Metcalf Street. I have a motion that report MHC 1523 relating to 114 Metcalf Street heritage designation be received for information, and further that a notice of intent to designate under Section 29 of the Ontario Heritage Act be given regarding the property at 114 Metcalf Street. Moved by Councillor Baldwin Sands, seconded by Counselor Peters.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried.
Moving into petitions and communications, one petition and communication before us this evening relating to proclamation and flag raising for Community Health and Wellbeing Week. I have motioned that Council of the City of St. Thomas proclaim October 2023. I got the right week. October 16th to 22nd, 2023 as Community Health and Wellbeing Week in the City of St. Thomas, and further that the Community Health and Wellbeing flag be flown at City Hall from October 16th to 22nd, 2023. I moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Wookie.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. Next item.
Your worship, unless there are any items of communication from the members, we'll now move into,
Councillor Baldwin Sands.
I have two items, please. First, on September the 29th, I just want to let my fellow members of council know that I represented the City of St. Thomas at the Ontario Parks Association and gave a introduction to all of the members that were in attendance from all over the province of Ontario, after they had had a preview of a lot of our naturalized areas in the community. So I was very pleased to do that. Also, if I may, would like to do a bit of a footnote to the event that happened on September the 30th on the steps of City Hall for Truth and Reconciliation. And that was hosted by you as acting mayor. And I was very pleased that also Councillor Gibson, Councillor McCauley and myself were there in attendance. And I'm very grateful that you understood the meaningfulness of us holding the flag as it was raised. So if you have any further comments, I ask you to present them at this time.
Thanks. It was a very moving day, and just look forward to the day that we don't have to do it, where truth and reconciliation is it's been accomplished. And I think the more we talk about it, the more that we can move forward with it. So very grateful to Amanda Stark and her committee who took the leadership role on behalf of the city, as well as the city manager for all her work and her staff's work. So it turned out to be a successful day. Thank you. Councillor Peters.
Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. I apologize that I wasn't there, but I was in Winnipeg. And on Saturday, the city of Winnipeg was a sea of orange. Everywhere you walked in Winnipeg, and businesses were closed in recognition of the day, but you couldn't walk anywhere and somebody wasn't wearing an orange shirt. And I don't know what their organizing committee is doing, but they sure had amazing community buy-in as we roamed around Winnipeg on Saturday.
Thanks. And I would add, maybe it's something that we take a look at, whether or not meeting in front of City Hall is the right place to do it, or do we move it to a park area where we can have a larger crowd and people seated and you know, good point, Councillor Peters. Next item, please.
If there are no further items from the members, either unfinished or new business of council, we'll now move into bylaws. I have a motion that leave be granted to bring in the bylaws, moved by Councillor Baldwin Sands, seconded by Councillor Herbert.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried.
I have a motion by Councillor Baldwin Sands, seconded by Councillor Herbert, that the bylaws be now read a first time, referred to council and committee of the whole, and read a second time.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried.
First bylaw.
First bylaw is a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the council meeting held on the second day of October, 2023.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Your next bylaw, please. Oh, passed. And the next bylaw, please.
Second bylaw is a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of the corporation to a certain agreement between the city and Stacy Lynn Hayho. This relates to 9520 Sunset Drive, and it was a condition of the variance regarding connection to municipal services.
Questions or comments? Seeing none? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. The third bylaw, please.
Third and final bylaw is a bylaw to authorize the mayor and clerk to execute and affix the seal of the corporation to a certain agreement between the city and Kettle Creek Conservation Authority relating to the cost apportioning agreement.
Questions or comments? Seeing none? All those in favor? Third and, oh, sorry, arise and report the successful full passing of all three bylaws.
Thank you.
Motion by Councillor Baldwin Sands, seconded by Councillor Herbert, that the report of council and committee of the whole on the three bylaws be received and adopted. The same be read a third time and gross, signed by the mayor and clerk, sealed and numbered.
Questions or comments? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried.
Next order of business is public notice. Notice is hereby provided that a public meeting will be held on October the 16th, 2023 at 6 p.m. regarding the proposed 2024 sewage service rate, fees and charges, as well as the proposed 2024 water consumption rate and water supply fees and charges change. Secondly, notice is hereby provided that administration intends to introduce a report and bylaws at the November 6th, 2023 council meeting relating to the proposed 2024 sewage service rate, fees and charges change, as well as the proposed 2024 water consumption rate, water supply fees and charges change. Next notice is that administration intends to introduce a report at the October 10th, 2023 council meeting relating to Willow Sheen Walkway Lighting Project. The next order of businesses is notices of motion. At a previous meeting, Councillor Baldwin Sands had put forward notice of the following motion. And so I have a mover for this motion that a bylaw and other related actions be prepared to require level 2 electric vehicle charging ready parking spaces for new multi-level residential buildings, and further that council prepare options to require level 2 electric vehicle charging ready parking spaces for new build detached housing. Your worship, if there's a thank you, seconded by Councillor Peters.
Questions or comments? Councillor Peters.
I support this I'd like to see it done in stages. I'd like to see a report come back to us first before we have a report and put a bylaw up. I think we need to make sure that we consult with organizations like the home builders and talk to them. Because you will all know that if this passes, all they're going to do, the home builders aren't going to eat these costs. It's just going to become part of the cost of your new home. So I'd like to, I think the consultation, but I also think, again, because we're moving in this direction, is if we're going to do something, why don't we take it further and look at industrial and commercial and institutional properties as well too, that if somebody's building a new plaza or a new factory or a new school, that these items be factored into it as well. So as I say, I would really like to hear staff come back, and let's not get so far ahead that we're just going to adopt, say yay or nay to a report and adopt a bylaw. I think let's make an informed decision with a staff report first.
Thank you, Councillor Kohler.
Thanks, Your Worship. I'm on that same page because I when it first came out, I looked at it, I did some research, and again, as Councillor Peters says, that the cost is just going to be passed on. Like housing is already unachievable for many people right now, and adding cost to it unnecessarily right now. I looked at that and thought maybe it's not a great idea, but looking at the motion again, it was like, okay, what does unrelated or other related actions mean? If that means going out, getting more information as to looking at it, because the builders I talked to, one is already roughing in to prepare for whatever technology has at that time. So even just saying level 2 electric vehicle chargers, like maybe we don't want to do that, because at the point of time down the road, who knows what it's going to be. So we probably don't even want to mention what type of charger is going to be in there. Other builders have it as an option, right? So the people have the choice whether they're going to put it in their house or not. Because if we just come through with a carte blanche bylaws to putting this in there, people are going to pay for it whether they have a electric vehicle or not. Hopefully everybody in the future ends up having one, and then they're going to do that. I talked to some friends that have installed EV chargers after the fact. And to be honest with you, I was kind of surprised because they ended up paying less money than what the option is for a new builder to put it in. So it's not like it's costing more money by not addressing it up front. So if somebody wants that choice later on, they still have that choice to install it later on. So and then in one of the builders that I talked to, Doug Terry, he quite frankly threw a lot of other things out there that should be considered before something like this comes into place. He's been doing a lot of work in this and actually said that he would offer chairing a group to look at it and investigate how to move it forward. He asked, did anybody talk to Integris? Do you even have in all the areas the proper power, which I'm sure, will be addressed in the future anyways. But there's a whole lot of things that we need to look at before we just say, hey, we're going to implement this bylaw. And I agree with Councillor Peters. In the long run, we need to do this. People can't just have chargers at home and then drive to work and then figure out how they're going to get back home, right? With all of that. But for myself, I want to see what other related actions mean. Does it mean we're going to go out, we're going to put a group together, investigate this, see what it makes sense, how we implement it, and leave it open for future technology to come down the road and not be specific. But I did ask Doug if it was okay to use his name and volunteer him for that, and he said absolutely, he'd be looking forward to participating in some form of moving this forward or coming up with what makes sense for St. Thomas.
Councillor Baldwin Sands.
Thank you. Since this is my notice of motion, I would like the opportunity to address those questions. That is what this is asking of staff, is to bring something back. And it's my hope that they come back with a number, even if it's 10% of all new residences that are being built, whether it's multi-residential or detached houses. If we look at 10%, for example, and we have 200 new, whether it's in the rapid housing or whether it's in the multi-units or whether it's in the single detached houses, if we do that, we have the opportunity to reduce, with that motion alone, 85 metric tons. It's the equivalent of planting 102 acres of trees. That's with 20 charging stations in homes, whether they are in the apartment buildings or whether they are in the homes themselves. 64% of Canadians that were surveyed on this survey that was done and presented are looking at their next vehicle purchase being an electric vehicle. There are 3 different levels of charging stations. Level 1 is a standard outlet. It is the slowest option. And we had this discussion earlier that there are some people, that's what they do, is they plug their electric vehicle in overnight, and that is how long it takes to charge that electric vehicle with a standard plug-in. That's the slowest option that is available. It takes 6 kilometers of range for every hour of a dedicated charger. What level 2 does, And level 2 is evolving, but they are still called level 2. It's similar, very similar to putting in a dryer outlet or a stove outlet, except for it goes into your garage. The third level is the Tesla standard. And that's with all of the other manufacturers coming on board to that Tesla standard. And that is a faster sign up, 10 to 20 times faster than what you can get with a level 2. It's designed to be that commercial level. That is why I'm proposing that this first step is only the first step towards residential use and having it done. And I'm looking forward to having a report back. And it is my understanding that a report can come back from staff as soon as December, if that is still clear. Yes. So this is step number 1. Yes, we can add the other things in, but this, because there is no federal jurisdiction that covers this, there is no provincial that covers this. This is something municipalities can do here and now. And that is the impact, is having 20 charging stations, whether it be in multi-use residence or single detached homes. That is the equivalent of planting 102 acres of trees.
Councillor Peters.
No, and Mr. Chair, thanks. And thanks, Councillor Baldwin Sands, for the clarification. I think it's the word bylaw that got me. And because the report back that's what I want to see. And that's how do we move forward? Because, you know, why wouldn't we consider the Tesla standard? You know, I'd like to see that in the report, the options in the report. You know, maybe in the report, it could look at what we can do to help those individuals doing the conversions. We have a community improvement plan. We just passed a number of things tonight. You know, maybe there's programs that we can put in place to incentivize people to do it and to make sure that it's done properly. I look at it's very similar to our tile drain disconnection program and our backwater valve program, where we subsidize the cost to you know, to prevent your basement from being flooded. So I would really, you know, again, I seconded the motion. I will support the motion. I just would like to see it be a very comprehensive report that can look at that development of a strategy, because I'd rather see us find a way to save 2,000 acres of trees or the equivalent of. So again, I'm supportive.
Councillor Baldwin Sands.
I thank Councillor Peters for bringing up the idea of support. There is already programs in place, especially for multi-use residential, that up to 50% rebates. And those are turnkey operations by organizations that do come in and do that for developers themselves. They're done with smart panels, they're done with third-party and sub-meter alterations that are done, and the appropriate software is provided with those, as I say, turnkey and up to a 50% rebate that are, if the developers themselves do a little bit of investigating.
Thanks. I appreciate all the hard work that you've done. And I was just wondering if, I haven't heard anyone against it, but I'm just wondering if we deferred if you wanted to defer the motion and, as Councillor Peters suggested, have it part of a report back to us. I understand that may be your intent, but when it says a bylaw, or I think that's the concern, is that if we pass this tonight, that we're passing a bylaw that says there will be requiring level 2 vehicles in new buildings. And I think that's the concern. Councillor Baldwin Sands.
Thank you. Thank you to Councillor Wookie for allowing me to jump in. Maria, would you like to provide some content to that?
Your worship, I believe Councillor Baldwin Sands was just looking to name some of the actions that council could take. And if there is some indication that there would be a requirement for parking spaces for new multi-residential dwellings, there would need to be bylaw changes, whether it's in site plan or other development agreement. So I believe the thinking was that if a bylaw action is needed, that would be one of the actions. Another action could be that a council report be prepared as well.
Councillor Wookie.
Thank you very much. I was thinking of a friendly amendment to strike out the top one and just add to new build detached housing and multi-unit residential buildings in the second one to get us the council report to come back regarding both. That's my suggestion.
Your worship, if Councillor Baldwin-Sands and Councillor Peters are in favor of the friendly amendment to remove the first clause.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to follow Councillor Baldwin Sands' lead. If she's supportive, I'm supportive.
I see a nodding of heads.
Okay, so the motion now reads that staff prepare options to require level 2 electrical vehicle charging ready parking spaces for new build detached housing and new multi-unit residential buildings.
Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I would still like to see this broadened. Like if we're going to put staff to go and write a report, we all know, we've just talked about it, there's other things that probably could be contained in this report. And I wouldn't want to just restrict staff to say, come back and report on these two things. These are important because to me, it makes a lot more sense to put it in the first place and not try and put it in later. But if there's other things that we can do as a council and make it a more comprehensive report back, that's what I'd like to see.
City Manager.
If I could, and through you, your worship, I think the desire for us to develop a strategy as it relates to green energy is important. And I think we will hear that as part of the strategic planning process. We're going to hear that from you as council members. We're going to hear that from our stakeholders in the community. If you want a comprehensive report to be done, and with respect to everyone who's asked for it, we need a little bit more time to make sure that we've got a comprehensive approach. So for that reason, while I am very appreciative that the staff agree that December is a possibility for this report, in order for us to do due diligence and good work, it's going to take a bit more time and to speak to stakeholders. If the report is simply to what you've decided in the revised proposed resolution, then we may be able to do that, but a broader piece will take more time than December. And I'm not suggesting we won't do it. I just want to be clear about expectations so that it's not expanded beyond that.
Councillor Kohler.
Thanks. That's exactly what I was going to say, because for me to vote in favor of this, I want to see a comprehensive report. I want to make sure that all the stakeholders are talked to. Doug Terry's reached out to and see if that's an avenue that we want to go. They've already done a lot of work in this. And when you look at the technology, there's technology out there right now that these cars, once they're fully charged, can actually put back into the system and help the whole grid that's going forward to make sure that that's done properly. Integris needs to be talked to in this. It's a bigger issue than that. And for myself, if it's going to be done properly, I'd hate to see staff have the timeline of December, because I don't want anything rushed and then be forced to vote against it, because right now that's what I want to see and be able to justify my decision in voting in favor or against it.
Councillor Herbert.
Yep, thank you, Worship. It's a great start to look at these stations, but I'm not so sure we have to be restricted just to new homeowners. Go down Wellington Road by McDonald's. There's 12 stations right off the Wellington Road. They come off the 401. Anybody uses it. I mean, we own arenas. Couldn't we put 4 or 5 stations in the arenas or around the city that people could use? So instead of restricting it, but I agree with Councilor Cole. It'd be nice to see a report with all those options put in, all heading in the right direction, putting up, eventually having stations to charge your car. So anyway, thank you.
Councillor Wookie.
Thanks very much. I'd be remiss if I did not discuss a little bit. Somebody mentioned Integris, and I was at 2 days of meetings with Integris, and we were looking at down the road at where future peak demand is going to be. And it was very interesting because electric vehicles are part of the equation, but the heat pumps, the heat exchange units for houses is looking like it's going to be something that is very widely adopted. And so they are looking, we as a board member are looking very much at what's going to happen, because it could very well be that whereas right now it's the peak electrical demand is in the middle of July between 2 and 5 p.m. The peak electrical demand may be January 30th at midnight. So we've got, I'm not saying this to be a pill. I'm just saying the electric vehicle thing is part of it. And the heat pump thing is another part of it in terms of what's happening in the broader industry's perspective. So I just wanted to provide that for people to know that Integris is looking at this very seriously. In terms of number of transformers needed per neighborhood, et cetera. Thank you.
Further questions or comments? Could we have the motion read again, the new, improved, friendly, amended motion?
Thank you, Your Worship. As it stands right now, the motion is that staff prepare options to require level 2 electric vehicle charging ready parking spaces for new build detached housing and new multi-unit residential buildings.
All those in favor? 1. Any opposed? That's carried.
Thank you, Your Worship. No further items in our open session at this time. There is a need to move into closed session. I've motioned that this meeting be closed to deal with a proposed or pending acquisition of land. Moved by Councillor Baldwin Sand, seconded by Councillor Gibson.
Questions or comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Any opposed? That's carried.